That was the voice of Coleman Francis in his directorial debut, The Beast of Yucca Flats. Now I know what you're all thinking. What exactly makes Coleman Francis a great American hero? To most people, a hero is someone who sets themselves a goal and achieves it. For example, you could say that George Washington is a hero. He started a revolution and started what is now one of the most, if not the most, influential country in the world. What about Lance Armstrong? Walked on the moon in 1969, 8 years after Coleman asked about the flag on the moon. Or maybe Jesse Owens, who won 4 gold medals at the 1936 Berlin Olympics and upset a lot of fascists. All are great examples, but I prefer a different kind of hero. One who never achieved what they believe to be their full potential. Those who try, yet sadly fail. Now Coleman Francis falls into this category, and that makes him my kind of hero. Now anyone can go on to achieve greatness, but not everyone can dedicate everything they have to something, and still not come out on top. Now I'll go on the record and say that I admire Coleman Francis for this. Not because he succeeded, but because he tried. Coleman Chambers Francis, to use his full name, was born on January 24th, 1919 in Greer County, Oklahoma. In 1940 he moved to Hollywood to become an actor, a dream that would however be shortly lived by World War II, where he was serving the Pacific Theatre. Afterwards he would return to acting, but these would mostly be uncredited roles in titles such as Blondie's Reward, This Island Earth, and Motorcycle, to name but a few. It wouldn't be until 1958 though when he would get his first acting credit in Stakeout on Dope Street, where he played as a detective. During this time he would also involve himself with a lot of theatre work. 1959 would however become his point of divergence, as that was the year he met a welder called Anthony Cardoza. The two would go on to form a partnership which gave the world 3 films: The Beast of Yucca Flats, Skydivers, and Red Zone Cuba. Coleman Francis would write and direct the films, while Anthony Cardoza would handle production issues, as well as acting in the films and raising the funds necessary to make the films in the first place. Now, unless you are a fan of bad films or Mystery Science Theater 3000, you're not likely to know who he is, but I hope that by the end of this you will be slightly more familiar. To say his films are good though would be a lie. While I personally think they do possess a certain charm, most will simply disagree and say no, they're just bad films. Now that is admittedly hard to argue with, as these films are not exactly masterpieces. But for me, I see someone who didn't have the expertise, the beggar bucks, or the fancy crews needed to make blockbusters. He just made something anyway. He wanted to tell a story, and he'd done it. In his first film, The Beast of Yucca Flats, Todd Johnson plays Joseph Jaworski, a Hungarian scientist who has defected to the United States, but is still being chased by the KGB. When he gets to Yucca Flats, his American escort is killed, and in a panic he runs into the desert where he gets too close to the testing of an atomic bomb. The radiation turns him into the titular beast with a taste for murder and necrophilia. In the second half of the film we meet the Radcliffes, a family travelling through the desert. Mrs. Radcliffe is portrayed by Coleman's then wife Barbara, and the 2 children would be played by his sons Alan and Ronald. Now in the second half, the Radcliffes go on the lookout for their 2 children, who have decided for reasons to go walking through the desert. It is on this trip that the 2 young boys would meet the titular beast himself. Now one thing I do like about this film is the way setbacks were handled on set. If you ever watch this film, you'll notice that people only talk when they're either off screen or too far away to see their mouths move. Now at first this may seem a strange choice, but the reality is that it was a very ingenious way of dealing with sound issues which can occur while filming outside, and as well as making sure that the words spoken during post-production dubbing matched the mouth movements of the actors on screen. Here are a few clips to show you how it worked. After the release, the film would flop commercially, and it would also be universally panned by critics, with many noting that the only positive feature of this film was the short running time of 54 minutes. Overall, it was a failure, but Coleman tried, and he would try again. The second film was For Skydivers, a film which really showed Coleman's love of coffee, light aircraft, and death. It is, however, in my opinion, the most unremarkable of the trilogy. The plot follows Harry and Beth Rowe, played by Anthony Cardoza and Kevin Casey. They run a skydiving facility in an unnamed desert town. Harry Rowe is having an affair with Susie, and halfway into the film, Beth starts an affair with new mechanic Joe Moss. Meanwhile, Harry agrees to stop seeing Susie after fighting her boyfriend Frankie. He does this on the condition, however, that if Frankie returns, he will break his legs. Susie, however, is enraged at this turn of events and decides to plot the death of Harry. She manipulates her boyfriend Frankie into pouring acid into the parachute that Harry will be using during a skydiving event near the end of the film. It all goes to plan, and due to acid in his parachute, Harry dies. Soon after, Frankie and Susie are shot by the police in a tense chase scene. Like all Coleman Francis films, however, they are shot without a trial, a common theme in each film. At least one thinking what Coleman Francis really thought of the police. Now, unlike the others, the only available copy of The Skydivers I could find online is the Mystery Science Theatre 3000 version. Frank Conniff, who played TV's Frank, described The Skydivers as Manos, the Hands of Fate, only without the lucid plot. Meanwhile, Tracy Beaulieu, who portrayed Dr. Clayton Forrester and voiced Crow T. Robot during this era, described this film as the worst he has ever covered during his period on the show. Now, there isn't much I can really say about The Skydivers, and these reviews pretty much sum up my feelings. It's boring. Anthony Cardoza is not believable as the supposed ladies' man, and the idea of putting acid in a parachute not being noticed doesn't really escape me as such. But I will admit that Kevin Casey is rather nice to look at, so there is that.
He ran all the way to hell.
And that famous line spoken by the late John Carradine brings us on to the last, and what is most likely the most infamous of all the Coleman Francis films, Red Zone Cuba. Like all of the Coleman Francis films, this carries the themes of coffee and death. You'll notice that there is also a heavy use of light aircraft, much like as you saw in Skydivers and the Beast of Yucca Flats. Now this time around though, Anthony Cardoza is credited as Tony Cardoza, despite the first frame labelling this as an Anthony Cardoza production. Despite that, this is still easily the most ambitious and competent of all the Coleman Francis films. Now for those eagle-eyed listeners, you will have noticed that John Carradine was somehow convinced to sing the theme tune, Night Train to Mundo Fine, which is also an alternate title for Red Zone Cuba. A scheme most likely done to increase distribution, and also sometimes to trick cinemagoers into thinking they're seeing a different film. A similar trick was used in the release of The Incredibly Strange Creatures Who Became Mixed Up Zombies by Cash Flag. Now, Night Train to Mundo Fine is special because, unlike other songs with a simple nature, it's strangely catchy and memorable. In reality, it has no real place here and belongs in a more competent production. I shall leave you to enjoy the rest of the song before I continue my analysis.
My fair, then fill your mind with greed that is blind and wander in its evil fog. Night train to Mundo Fine, night train to the end, running hard and running fast to beat my future and away from my past. Taking the gamble that cannot last. night train to the end.
The title follows Griffin, the portly man you just saw running from the police, as portrayed by Coleman Francis himself. He was the Cotton King of the South before his schemes caught up to him and he found himself behind bars. Now escaped, he makes the acquaintance of Cook and Landis, two fellow outlaws, played by Harold Saunders and Anthony Cardoza. The two men are also on the run, and with Griffin in tow they bump into the illustrious Cherokee Jack, played by George Prince, or if you watched The Beast of Yucca Flats, George Prince of Hay, who tells of the riches that they could inherit if they were to take part in the American invasion of Cuba.
Cherokee Jack?
Yeah, I'm Cherokee Jack.
For those of you who love Mystery Science Theatre 3000 as much as I do, then you would have already recognised the famous catchphrase, "I'm Cherokee Jack." Despite it being forgettable, it becomes a running joke throughout the episode, and to this day it still remains a heavily quoted line amongst the fandom. To get back to the film, Griffin, Landis and Cook are convinced by Cherokee Jack that for their truck he'll take them to an army base free of charge, where they will receive army training as well as $1,000 to join up and another $1,000 once Cuba is liberated from communism. It is during this part of the film though where we learn Griffin's backstory, and that after his conviction his wife was forced to become a streetwalker, which is old slang for prostitute for those not in the know. The dots are truly connected for most of the audience though when Griffin starts to strangle Cook after he refers to her as a beautiful broad when he saw her picture in the paper. This part will make most of the audience feel pity for Griffin despite his general dislikable nature. When the Cuban invasion happens, there is a lot of rope climbing, and our three heroes are eventually captured by Fidel Castro, played here by Anthony Cardoza. While in captivity, they learn that their comrade Chastain volunteered in order to serve his country, that he also has a ton of land which is filled with tungsten just waiting to be mined. Despite offering to share, the three leave Chastain to his fate and escape after several quotes of "water, thirsty, sick man." After seeing a light aircraft, they head back to America to get their hands on the tungsten, or as it is referred to here, pitch blende. Upon arriving back in the United States, the three men chance upon a rundown diner run by an old man named Cliff Wisemeyer and his blind daughter who plays the piano. The three men order coffee, as it is a Coleman Francis film after all, and they make conversation about the state of the diner and the family. After a brief respite though, the three men kill the owner by dropping him down a cellar which may or may not be filled with dead frogs. They then empty his till and steal his car. After this though, Griffin decides to head back to the diner and rape the blind woman. This eliminates what little sympathy we had for Griffin. Typical Coleman Francis really. We had sympathy, and then he decides to destroy it. After this, they then jump on John Carradine's train and they make their way to see Mrs. Chastain in order to get the pitch blende. After much making nice and convincing the widow to start mining, the trio are eventually caught up by the police. This results in a shootout and death of Griffin, who was killed without a trial. A common theme amongst the films of Coleman Francis if you haven't noticed yet. The narrator then says that Griffin ran all the way to hell with nothing but a penny and a broken cigarette, thus ending the film.
Griffin ran all the way to hell with a penny and a broken cigarette.
Oh, and somehow, Chastain returned. Now to sum up, my admiration for Coleman Francis comes not from his ability as a filmmaker, nor from the quality of his films. It comes from the fact that he tried. I like people who try. He had an idea, and he made it. Sure, they may be of the same quality as productions from the like of Ed Wood and Roger Corman, but there is something about Coleman which stands out so much more for me. There's a certain something that keeps bringing me back, and I truly cannot convey it in words. In a way, I am Coleman Francis. I'll never achieve stardom, which admittedly is a good thing. My budget is extremely low and my technical skills are minimal, to say the least. But maybe that's why I feel such a connection to him. Either way, as a figure, I find myself thinking about him a lot, and I find myself wondering what it was that went through his mind when he was making his films. I mean, what exactly made him decide that Griffin, after making us sympathetic towards him, had to do that to the blind pianist lady? I mean, seriously, Colin, what were you thinking at that point? We were behind Griffin for at least a little bit anyway, even if he was a scumbag to begin with. But I digress. By this point, though, he was already divorced from his wife when he made The Beast of Yucca Flats. Although he did have her play the wife of desert wanderer Hank, and his two sons would play the adventurous children who go missing. Three would also take up minor roles in The Skydivers, although their presence in Red Zone Cuba is missing for reasons unknown. After Red Zone Cuba, his career would take a downward turn and he would turn to alcoholism. His acting roles would get smaller and smaller until he got his last role in Russ Meyer's Valley of the Dolls. According to Russ Meyer, he found Coleman on the street, drunk and babbling nonsense. Although out of sympathy, he would offer him a role in his film. Apparently, on the day of recording, Coleman Francis turned up in a brand new suit, clean shaven, a new haircut, and he looked like he was living his best life. Turns out Coleman was a professional, if nothing else. Coleman Francis would die 3 years later, only 9 days before his 54th birthday. The official cause of death is arteriosclerosis, although according to Anthony Cardoza, he says that Coleman was found in the back of a car with a plastic bag over his head and a tube going into his mouth, suggesting that he unalived himself. He is interred at the Columbarium of Remembrance in the Westwood Village Memorial Park Cemetery in Los Angeles. If you find yourself in the area, why not drop by and offer a flower's tribute to a man who tried to achieve his dream and failed? Because let's face it, most of us give up on dreams. Coleman, however, didn't. And in my opinion, it most likely cost him his life in the long run. I try not to think about that last bit for obvious reasons. Such things, however, are an inevitability of life. And we shouldn't judge those who do decide to end things in such a way. If you do find yourself interested in Coleman Francis and you wish to know more, then I do suggest you check out the Search for Coleman Francis videos by Sue's Brothers Entertainment. They currently have 2 videos, and they are hoping to make a third in the future. They will have a lot more information than I do. A link to the video will be in the description. If you do find yourself struggling, then please talk to someone. 99% of you out there will have someone who loves you, even if you don't realise it. If you can't find the courage or desire to speak to someone you know, then please contact one of the many volunteer organisations which help people with dark thoughts. I'll put links to several organisations in the description for those of you out there, but for obvious reasons I can't link every single organisation in the world. If your country isn't mentioned, or one that you like isn't mentioned, then you should be able to find one of your liking using the search engine. They're all good. That's it for me now though. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and please, take care of yourselves, okay? Bye.